With Phoebe in beta and Jinhsi getting her very first rerun very soon, a lot of people have been wondering, who is the better Spectro DPS? Is it Phoebe or is it Jinhsi? This is a very important question to have answered for a lot of people because they have limited polls, and if Jinhsi gets power crept literally the banner after her rerun, a lot of people are going to feel bad. So that's why I'm going to be answering that question today. However, first I would like to give a disclaimer. Phoebe is currently still in beta, and the reason I feel the need to mention this is because her being in beta means she can still change a lot, and given the current state of her kit, I do expect she will be changed a lot. So if there's any beta updates that you want to know about, be sure to check the pinned comment. Any relevant changes will be there. Now, I want to talk about the categories I am going to be talking about when I compare Jinhsi and Phoebe, because I think a DPS has a lot more to them than just damage. The first category is going to be damage. Obviously, when you are a DPS, your primary job is to do a lot of damage to kill the enemies as fast as possible. This makes sense. This is the most important and simple job for a DPS to do. Next up, we have ease of use. If most people can't even get the optimal damage out of a character, or not even good damage out of a character, why should I even bother recommending them to anyone? It's one thing to do a lot of damage, but it's a whole other thing to be simple to use while doing all that damage. And then finally, for team options. Obviously, you want to use your DPS in the very best team possible, but this will not always be the case. So what if you don't have the very best team? Well, you're gonna need alternatives. So if you don't have those, you're kinda cooked. So on to category 1, damage. Starting with Jinhsi. Jinhsi is currently the second highest DPS character in the game, only being behind Carlotta. And the thing with Carlotta is the fact that she has next to no AoE, whereas Jinhsi does have very good AoE. So Jinhsi is already off to an incredible start. She has a lot of damage within her kit, but most of it being centered within her big nuke damage, aka her Illuminous Epiphany, Solar Flare. This is the big nuke, and this is the thing everyone will look at with screenshots. This is the single highest hit of damage within Withering Waves that I believe to be currently possible at S0R1. And it makes sense that this is a lot of Jinhsi's damage. But don't be fooled, because it's definitely not all of it. She also definitely has a very powerful ultimate, and we should not be underestimating her basics and her skill within her incarnation state. So she has a great mix of sustained damage, but also very large nukes. Now moving on to Phoebe's damage. Phoebe as a main DPS is very interesting, because if we look at these characters in a vacuum, allowing absolutely no damage buffs, Phoebe has some of the highest damage in the entire game. All she needs to do her damage is to just have Spectro Frazzle on the enemy. But obviously this is not a solo game, this is a team game. So it is obviously going to matter that your teammates are good. Because if you're not able to be buffed, what are you really going to do? Let's be honest. And that's where Phoebe's issue lies. There's no effective damage buffers for Phoebe at the moment. Almost every single damage buffer has some sort of issue that makes it so Phoebe cannot properly utilize her, making it so her damage within a hypercarry setting is not that good. But within dual carry teams, she will be stronger than Shang Liao if we replace a healer with the Spectra Rover on the Rejuvenating Glow set, which means that she does have a very nice place within dual carry team. But even with that, I'm gonna have to point for damage to Jinhsi. Next up, usability. Starting with Jinhsi again. Jinhsi is an incredibly simple character to use at a baseline, because it really is just as simple as intro skill, use her skill, do 4 basics and then also her skill, and then you end it off with the nuke and you go into your next character. The thing is that a lot of her complications arise when you try to optimize her gameplay, be it through animation cancels or optimal rotations. So not only is Jinhsi very easy to use, she also has a good damage ceiling and a lot of optimization for her abilities. So it's incredibly easy to get started with Jinhsi, and unlike most characters that are easy to use, she doesn't need to sacrifice optimization for this, much like GN. But it's even better than GN, because the low skill playstyle doesn't come with crippling energy requirements. So Jinhsi has just some of the best low skill gameplay in the entire game. Moving on to Phoebe, it's a very similar story. Just like Jinhsi, Phoebe's game plan as a DPS is incredibly simple. All you want to do is just start out with the heavy attack to proc your absolution mode, and then you want to just do 3 basic attacks and heavy attack 3 more times, and then that's just kinda all your damage right there. Although this does come at the cost of Phoebe being a bit worse to optimize, because the only thing you can really do to optimize your Phoebe gameplay is to cancel her 3rd basic attack's animation, because it is quite a long animation, and sitting through the whole thing is oftentimes not worth it. Instead, most of Phoebe's optimization is going to come from her team, because currently her best teammates are dual carry, so that automatically requires a lot of swapping and a lot of micromanaging, so her optimization is going to come from that. So who gets the point for usability here? I'm gonna have to call it a tie. Jinhsi and Phoebe are both incredibly simple characters with an incredibly simple game plan. It's honestly kind of surprising just how simple both of these characters are to use. And then for the final category, I'm gonna have to turn to the team variety. Both of these characters feature a lot of characters that they can use within their teams, to varying degrees of success. Starting, yet again, with Jinhsi. Jinhsi's best in slot team is obviously going to be with Zhezhi and then either Verena or Shorekeeper, both of them bringing their own advantages to the table. Shorekeeper with her superior buffs, and then Verena with extra coordinate attacks and a faster rotation. So Jinhsi has an incredibly solid core going on for her. But what happens when we take one of these characters away? Well, if you don't have Shorekeeper available, you can always turn to Verena. And if you don't have Verena available, you can turn to the Shorekeeper. But if you don't have either of them, it gets kind of tricky. While Baizhi is an option that has coordinate attacks, this would conflict with the fact that Zhezhi is also a Glacio character. And because they're the same element, they're not able to work together in stacking Jinhsi's Forte bar. So if you don't have Verena or Shorekeeper available, you're not really able to use your Zhezhi either, being a big damper. Now, if Zhezhi is the character you don't have, which is very reasonable given Carlotta's prevalence in the meta right now, your options are limited, but they are still there. There is Yinlin, who is actually a pretty decent character to use with Jinhsi. The main thing she has going for her is her personal damage, and while I have talked at length about how much she needs Stringmaster to really utilize this personal damage, the addition of the Empyrean Anthem set has also given her some supportive quality, so Yinlin is not bad at all. There's also Yuanwu with Rejuvenating Glow, and then the Originite Type 3. This is a very low maintenance and low investment character to use, being incredibly good for any free-to-play accounts that don't have many resources to waste. Outside of Yuanwu, there is also Mortefi, I guess, but I wouldn't pay much mind to this option. There's also the fact that you can run Jinhsi as a dual carry, obviously with the best option out of all the dual carries being Changli, as she tends to be. My main issue with Jinhsi dual carry teams is that Jinhsi's swap cancel windows are either unnecessary or easy to cancel as a hyper carry. Think about her longest attack animations. Her 4th basic attack, her 3rd basic attack, and then her skill. In an optimal rotation, Jinhsi would want to cancel the 3rd basic attack with her skill and then the 4th basic attack with her nuke, leaving only the skill as something you can truly swap cancel. So I don't think this is really that great of a usage for your Jinhsi if you're able to use a different option. Now moving on to Phoebe. She has a lot of different options for her teammates, but that's more so because she doesn't really have a perfect synergy with any one character. Her best teams are going to be a dual carry setup, and obviously the best person to use here in this dual carry team would be Changli, much like with Jinhsi. However, Phoebe does have some very cancelable attacks. For example, her 3rd basic attack and her Forte heavy attack. These are both going to be used plenty of times within the rotation, so that makes it so that Phoebe is actually able to swap quite a lot. And she's not just entirely linked to Changli for dual carry teams, because she's also capable of using Shang Liao to a pretty good extent, as well as Brant, so she'll have no shortage of characters to swap cancel with. If you don't like swap canceling, you can also turn to hypercarry teams. And while Phoebe's hypercarry teams are not as good as those of Jinhsi, they're still worth mentioning. She has really decent pairings with both Mortefi and Sanhua, which, especially for Mortefi, we love to see, given the fact that Mortefi only has one real team currently, being with a GN. So him getting another team is pretty nice, and a lot of people don't even have GN. so the Mortefi will finally get a real use case. But the main advantage that I feel that Phoebe has is the fact that she doesn't even want to use Shorekeeper or Verena in her best teams, instead opting to use the Spectra Rover. This is one of the biggest qualities that Phoebe has in my opinion, because Verena and Shorekeeper are incredibly contested within Wuthering Waves' meta, so there finally being a DPS where it's optimal to not use them is really good to see. So while it is incredibly close, I'm gonna have to give the versatility point to Phoebe. Now, who do I think is better overall? I'm gonna be self-real with you, it's Jinhsi. Phoebe is not competing with Jinhsi in the Spectre DPS niche anytime soon. Even in her swap cancel teams, which are more effort than Jinhsi's hypercarry teams, she is not able to really come close to Jinhsi. And while she does have a lot of team options, a lot of people pull Zheja specifically to support their Jinhsi. So it proves that a lot of people are willing to pull a character just to make a character's most optimal team. And the fact that Jinhsi still has good alternatives beyond this makes it so that I can't really fault her for really liking her Zheja. But yeah, that's just my take on things. If you disagree with me, be sure to let me know in the comments below, and while you're down there, like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to enter the discussion with me, be sure to join my Discord, in which I am pretty active, so if you send a message there, I'll be sure to respond. If you just want to hear my random thoughts on stuff, be sure to follow me on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it. Both my Discord and Twitter are linked in the description. But that'll be it from me. Peace.